My mother called me a defect at my sister's wedding in front of 200 guests before I'd even finished my first glass of champagne. 9 years of silence, and that was her opening line. By the end of that night, her entire dynasty was on the floor, and I never once raised my voice. My name is Grace Whitfield. This is what happened when they threw me out of a family that never once dug me a grave because they'd never even bothered to bury me. I'm 28. In my parents' house hangs a wall of 11 framed medical degrees, 3 generations of physicians. Sunday dinners had a liturgy. My mother asked each of us what we'd achieved that week, graded like lab results. My sister Vivian had numbers ready. I could splint a bird's wing and rebandage my grandmother's shin better than a visiting nurse, but I froze in academic competitions. The summer I turned 14, a 12th frame appeared on that wall. Empty. "It's yours," my mother said. Pending. At my own high school graduation dinner, my mother stood, tapped her glass, and announced Vivian's medical school acceptance instead. When someone finally remembered to toast me, she raised her glass and said, "One daughter got the Dixon mind. The other got, well," and let the silence do the rest. I finished my cake. It tasted like drywall. Later that night, she walked me to the wall, tapped the empty frame, and delivered the family motto like a diagnosis. In this family, love is earned. This frame is waiting. I told her it could wait forever. I wasn't going to medical school. Then it will hang empty, she said, and everyone who visits will know why. She had no idea how right she was, just not in the direction she meant. 10 months later, they threw me out for real. My $80,000 college fund got quietly reallocated to Vivian's medical education. An investment goes where the return is, my mother said, like reading a weather report. At 19, I'd already opened my own bank account and finished a CNA certification at night. My mother could survive a daughter who failed toward medicine. She could not survive one who succeeded toward the help. The ultimatum came on a Tuesday. Quit my caregiving job, retake the entrance exams, or leave. I packed in 40 minutes, 2 trash bags, my certification folder, and a nurse's steel watch my grandmother Ruth had just given me off her own wrist. "Nobody earns love, honey," Ruth told me on her porch swing the night before. I wouldn't understand the rest of that sentence for 10 more years. At the door, my mother said, "You're choosing to be nobody." I said, "I'm choosing to be somebody you don't get to grade." 3 years later, Ruth had a stroke. Because my mother held her medical power of attorney, I was legally barred from even visiting my own dying grandmother. I stood at a hospice front desk in my scrubs, while a kind receptionist checked a clipboard that didn't have my name on it. 11 days later, Ruth died. I learned about the funeral afterward from a neighbor. A week before her stroke, Ruth had left me a voicemail, 41 seconds long. I hit play the night I found out she was gone, got 12 seconds in, and stopped it every single time for the next 5 years because I couldn't bear to hear it end. Grief either buries you or it pours a foundation. 6 months after losing Ruth, I took $12,000 out of a coffee can and started my own home care agency, Brightwater. My hiring policy was one sentence: hire the ones who show up. 5 years later, we had 340 caregivers across 3 states, and I was founder and president. One Tuesday, a hospital called about a patient nobody else would take. The trauma surgeon on the line asked if Brightwater was as good as its reputation. I said, both. That was Daniel Whitfield. We married 2 years later in his mother's backyard. 30 guests, a barbecue. I took his name gladly. Dixon had only ever been a debt. 2 weeks before that backyard wedding, I mailed my parents an invitation anyway. It came back 13 days later, opened, read, resealed, and remailed in my mother's handwriting, with one line on the back in blue ink. Don't embarrass yourself. 2 years ago, my company sponsored a hospital fellowship. My only condition, it had to be named the Ruth Chase Fellowship, after my grandmother, with my own name appearing nowhere at all. The first recipient was a young internist with good hands. His name was Eric Holston. This spring, that stranger I'd anonymously funded sent me a wedding invitation because he was marrying my sister, Vivian. At the ceremony, I sat in the back with Daniel's hand over mine and watched my sister marry a man I'd accidentally helped create. During the reception, my mother's voice reached me from behind a stone column. Our daughter, our only child, we poured everything into her. I stood frozen behind that pillar. I had prepared to be the estranged footnote. I hadn't prepared to be erased entirely. Then my mother read the seating chart and found me at table 2. Groom's family, honored guests, right beside the head table, seated next to a man in a good suit, whose colleagues kept stopping by to pay their respects. She had no idea who Dr. and Mrs. Whitfield even were, and couldn't ask without revealing she'd never once wondered. The groom's mother, Susan Holston, chief of medicine, walked straight up and introduced herself warmly. "How do you know our Vivian?" I gave her the smallest true thing in the room. We grew up in the same town. Vivian cornered me by the coat check minutes later, gripping my wrist. "Whatever you told her, walk it back." I asked her one question. "What did you tell them happened to me?" She looked me dead in the eye. "There is no story. You don't exist. As far as the Holstons know, I'm an only child." Her hands were shaking the entire time. Not wedding jitters shaking, hospice clipboard shaking, and a decade of night shifts had taught me exactly what that kind of fear actually means. One lie was standing on top of another. During toasts, my mother rose in pearl gray and delivered the family catechism. Everything in this family is earned. Nothing is given away free at our table. 200 guests raised their glasses. Then Eric stood up, went off script, and said he wanted to thank 2 people who made him the doctor standing there tonight. My mentor, Dr. Daniel Whitfield, table 2. Applause. Every Dixon head in the room turned. Then, the second person funded my entire fellowship, named for a nurse, Ruth Chase, who worked 40 years of night shifts. She built a company from nothing at 23. Grace Whitfield, would you stand? I stood. My mother rose too, not to applaud. Her face had gone the color of old snow. "There's been a mix-up," she said. And Vivian, in front of the live microphone, blurted, "You are not invited." Eric turned to his bride slowly. "I invited her. This is the woman who paid for my fellowship. How dare you?" My mother reached for rank one last time. "Eric, dear, this is a family matter." Susan Holston rose without hurry and asked my sister one question that ended everything. "Vivian, you told us you were an only child." Nobody answered. That was the answer. My mother crossed to me and gripped my arm, calibrated loud enough for exactly 3 rows. "Grace, darling, we'll discuss this privately." 9 years, a returned invitation, a hospice clipboard with my name missing, and I'd graduated to darling the second there were witnesses worth performing for. I lifted her hands off my arm the way I used to lift a patient's, firmly, kindly, without negotiation, and asked her one quiet question. "You have no idea, do you, about anything after April?" Then I walked toward the terrace, and she followed me alone, where the real offer finally came. In the stone corridor, my mother finally dropped the performance completely. "Here's what happens now," she said, hands trembling. "You come home. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Sunday dinners. The frame gets filled. You finally earned your place." All I had to do was carry one lie back into that ballroom. I looked at her shaking hands, the tremor that had ended her own surgical career years earlier, and for one breath felt something close to pity. Then I let it go. I walked back inside, and when Susan Holston asked me directly, in front of both families, whether I'd been part of that family, I gave her the only true thing that mattered. I was born a Dixon. At 19, I was told love is earned in that house, and I stopped earning it. I haven't spoken to them in 9 years. I never told Vivian's secret. That was hers to drop, not mine to hand over. Mercy turned out to be the only revenge that leaves your own hands clean. I turned to my mother one last time. No, the frame stays empty. I built my own wall. Then I walked out through the front doors, at the exact center of the aisle. The Holstons went back and checked the record after that night. Vivian's dermatology practice had no lease, no license. Her residency had ended halfway through her 2nd year. Not paused, ended. Eric filed for annulment 6 weeks later, kindly, and kept the Ruth Chase name on his email signature for good. My mother resigned her hospital committee chairmanship that fall. Nobody fired her. Her currency had simply lost all value in every room that had ever mattered to her. That night, on the terrace, I finally played Ruth's 41-second voicemail all the way through, for the first time in 5 years. Nobody earns love, honey. Love is the thing they can't bill you for. You were never the empty frame, Gracie. You were the whole wall and the house it holds up. Here's what I learned. Love that has to be earned was never love. It was a job with no wages, and you're allowed to quit a job. The people who make you audition for a seat at their table were never actually offering you one. And the family you build afterward will always hold every person your old chairs never fit. If this story moved you, I'd love to hear from you. Drop your city or state in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more real stories like this every week, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. It genuinely means everything to this channel. Until next time, go build your own wall.